In the old tales of the Slavic world, the forest is not just a collection of trees. It is a character, a breathing entity, heavy with memory, that broods on the edge of our known world. To enter it is to step across a threshold where the fabric of reality begins to fray. The air seems too thick, as though it has been breathed before by unseen mouths. The silence is not empty, but crowded, waiting, dense with presences. Those who are desperate, brave, or foolish enough to wander deep into these woods do not merely lose their way, they cross into the realm of things that ought not to exist. The path fades behind you. The sound of bells and hearths, of laughter and the human village, is swallowed by the oppressive hush of the green cathedral. Only your footsteps remain, and even they seem intrusions. A snapped twig rings like a crack in glass, and the sighing wind mimics a name you almost recognize. Even the birds fall silent, and you wonder if they too are listening. The trees rise like pillars, black at the roots, silver at the tips, and between them coils a darkness too alive to be called shade. In these woods, time moves like a wounded animal, limping, staggering, circling back upon itself, and somewhere within this endless maze lies her domain. You do not find her at once. First, you find her house. It should be an impossible sight, a childish delirium made solid, a log cabin, crooked and crude, balanced precariously on two colossal chicken legs, scaly as reptilian limbs. The house does not rest, it stirs. It steps, scratches, shakes, and sometimes spins in a mad, dizzying whirl, as though caught in a storm of its own making. It is no passive shelter but a living thing, a predator masquerading as a home, and around it stands a fence of bones, posts sharpened from femurs, lintels cut from spines, the gate locked with a jaw of human teeth. Upon each post sits a skull, its empty sockets glowing with an ember light that flickers though no fire burns. The skulls grin in silence, their hollow gaze fixed on every trespasser. At times, villagers whisper. The flames inside them murmur the names of those who once wore the flesh. To approach this house is not simple courage. It is ritual. One cannot stumble forward, as one would to a neighbor's cottage. You must stop at the clearing's edge, bow once as if before a shrine, and speak the incantation passed through trembling lips across generations. Hut, O hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. Only then, the stories say, does the house respond. Its great legs groan, bending like knees, lowering the cabin upon the earth with a creak of ancient timbers. The door swings, no longer hidden, no longer sealed, and the hut becomes a threshold rather than a fortress. Say the words wrong, and the hut may spin until your eyes burst and your spirit tumbles from your body. Say nothing at all, and it will simply walk away, vanishing into the night with its collection of skull lamps, leaving you stranded in the silence. For who is the mistress of this impossible home? She is a monster, they say, who sharpens her teeth on a stone and feasts upon the flesh of the lost. She is also a wise woman, a keeper of forbidden gifts, who offers what may save kingdoms and heal broken hearts. She commands the elements. She controls the winds, the rain, and the uncanny powers of life and death. She flies not on broomstick but in a vast mortar, guiding her course with its pestle, sweeping away her traces with a silver birch broom so that none may follow. For centuries, her name has haunted the forests of Eastern Europe, Baba Yaga. Yet is she villain, helper, or something else entirely, an elemental law wrapped in flesh, as neutral and merciless as the forest itself? To answer, one must walk the same crooked path as the heroes of old. To survive, one must show respect, courage, and silence in equal measure. Above all, one must be willing to knock on her door. The Slavic peasants who whispered her name understood. The forest was not merely wood and leaf, but the afterbreath of gods. In its depths, the rules of hearth and plough were broken. Roads became rivers of fog. Owls carried prayers on their wings, and mushrooms sprouted in circles that opened upon worlds unseen. Entering was itself a ritual, a passage from the human into the chthonic, one foot still in life, the other already shadowed by death. The house of Baba Yaga was not just a dwelling, it was a shrine, a guardian, a gate that decided who might approach the witch and who must remain forever outside, lost among whispering roots. The folklore speaks of those who dared. They tell of men who sought power and of women who sought wisdom. Some returned with fire, gold, or truths sharper than swords. Others returned not at all. Their bones fed the fence. Their skulls became the lanterns. To walk here is to gamble not with life, but with soul. It is to test whether the witch will see in you prey or pilgrim. This ambiguity is the essence of Baba Yaga. She is not bound by the simple divisions of saint and demon. She is a paradox woven into human memory, both the hand that devours and the hand that blesses. To knock at her door is to submit oneself to judgment. Will she grant you the glowing skull, the ember of forbidden fire, or will she sharpen her iron teeth and grind your bones to flour? That is the question whispered whenever a wanderer disappears in the woods. The ancients knew that to face Baba Yaga was to step into a myth larger than the self. The house itself was a spell, and the fence of bones a sermon in mortality. The spinning hut was the wheel of time, turning day into night, youth into age, life into death. To bow before it, to utter the ritual words, was to acknowledge the fragility of flesh. It was to place yourself in the hands of powers older than kings and churches, older even than gods of thunder. For Baba Yaga is not only a witch in the woods, she is the old crone of fate, the winter wind personified, the hunger of the earth that takes what it is owed. And she waits still, in the clearing beyond the whispering trees, for the knock of the next trembling hand upon her impossible door. She is a monster who sharpens her teeth upon a stone, until sparks leap like fireflies. She devours the flesh of the lost, sucking marrow as if it were honey. Yet in the same breath, she is the wise woman who can give you the one talisman that saves a kingdom, the herb that heals a dying child, the flame that lights the darkest road. She is cruel judge and benevolent donor, a paradox bound in the figure of an old woman with iron teeth and hair like smoke. Baba Yaga defies the neat categories of good and evil. She is a force. To those who stumble into her world without respect, she is terror. To those who approach with courage and humility, she becomes a keeper of mysteries. Legends say she commands the elements. Storms obey her hiss. Rivers slow at the sweep of her broom. When she travels, it is not on a horse or chariot, but in a massive mortar, a household vessel turned into a cosmic vehicle. With its pestle, she steers across the night sky, grinding clouds into thunder. Behind her, she sweeps with a birch broom, erasing her tracks not only from earth but from memory itself. Once she passes, there is no trace. It is as though she was never there, except in the bone fence and the chill that lingers. To glimpse her flight is to glimpse something forbidden, a woman wielding the domestic tools of mortar and broom, not for nurture, but for dominion, her ordinary instruments transfigured into symbols of dreadful sovereignty. For centuries, one name has whispered along the edges of fields and over the mouths of wells: Baba Yaga. Grandmothers mutter it as warning, children shiver at it in bedtime tales, and travelers leave offerings of bread and milk at the edge of the wood, hoping her eyes will not turn toward them. But what is she? Is she demon, goddess, or the very forest itself disguised as an old woman? Perhaps she is none, and all at once. The Slavic imagination saw her as the wild heart of nature, incarnate, fertile yet barren, devouring yet giving birth, chaos yet keeper of law. Her hut does not face the world unless summoned, and even then it obeys only when the right formula is spoken. Such a home is more than a dwelling. It is a ritual in architecture, a temple that decides who may approach its mistress. Only those who know the words may stand before her. To knock on Baba Yaga's door is not to ask for bread or salt. It is to invite an ordeal. The witch does not simply appear, she must be summoned with ritual precision, with a respect that acknowledges the ancient laws. Her domain is a liminal space, a borderland between life and death, order, and chaos. To pass through her fence of bones is to admit you are no longer of the village, no longer under the law of men, but now subject to the law of something older, more terrible, and more just. In this way, Baba Yaga is paradox embodied. She is devourer and teacher, mother and grave, curse and cure. She is not what you want her to be, she is what you need to face. Some folklorists whisper that Baba Yaga is more than a character. She is the fractured memory of a goddess. In her loom of contradictions, terror and blessing, destruction and protection echo the ancient crone figures of old Europe, the weavers of fate, the winter hags, the guardians of the underworld. To call her witch is to shrink her into a single role. To see her as paradox is to glimpse her true size, as vast as the forest, as inevitable as death, as mysterious as the moon. She is the mother who kills her children to feed the earth, and the grandmother who saves them with a charm. She is a threshold spirit, a liminal keeper, who tests not by whim, but by necessity. If she devours you, it is because you failed her laws. If she blesses you, it is because you proved worthy of walking her path. She is the problem, and she is the solution. That is why the tales insist. To meet Baba Yaga is to be judged. Few leave unchanged. Some leave burned to ash. Some leave carrying the fire of wisdom. But all leave knowing they have brushed against a truth too large for human speech. The stories urge us. If you wish to understand Baba Yaga, you must not look at her in isolation. Instead, follow the path of those who faced her heroes and heroines whose lives were unmade and remade in her shadow. And among them, none is more famous than a young girl named Vasilisa the Beautiful, whose tale begins not in the forest, but with a mother's dying gift, a small doll, and a promise that when darkness fell, the doll would guide her. It is through Vasilisa's eyes that we see the witch most clearly, not as caricature or monster, but as trial, as gatekeeper, as paradox incarnate. The story of Vasilisa the Beautiful begins not with the witch herself, but with a deathbed and with a final gift. Her mother, fading into the pale shadows of illness, summoned the girl close and pressed into her hands a small wooden doll. Its painted eyes were bright, its dress sewn with care, but it was no ordinary toy. "Feed this doll, my child," her mother whispered, her breath already half in another world. "Consult it when you are in trouble, and it will help you." With those words, she departed, leaving behind not only grief, but a legacy of guidance, a secret wisdom pressed into wood and cloth. The doll was more than a keepsake. It was the living embodiment of Vasilisa's maternal line, the distilled wisdom of ancestors given shape. When she broke bread at night and offered the doll a crumb, it was not mere play. It was ritual, an act of feeding the spirit that watches over the home, not unlike the offerings made to the domovoi, the household guardian who kept the hearth safe. To nourish the doll was to keep alive the thread that bound Vasilisa to the strength of her mother's soul even from beyond the grave. In some tellings, a red thread was tied around the doll's wrist, a symbol of protection, the same string used in folk charms, to ward against the evil eye. What seemed a child's gesture was, in truth, an act of devotion as old as the shrines hidden in the forests. But grief does not guard against cruelty. Soon after her mother's passing, Vasilisa's father remarried. The stepmother, sharp as frost, arrived with 2 daughters of her own, bitter of spirit and cruel of heart. Where Vasilisa shone with quiet beauty and grace, they smoldered with envy. Each day they devised new torments, endless chores, impossible tasks, mocking words that clawed at her gentleness. They wished to grind her down until her light was extinguished. Yet each night, when her tears fell onto the doll, she whispered her troubles, and the doll stirred with uncanny life. It comforted her, set its small wooden hands to impossible work, and by dawn the chores were miraculously done. Gardens weeded, water drawn, fires kindled, all while Vasilisa slept. The doll, ever silent in daylight, was the secret ally that turned cruelty into endurance. And so, despite the torments, Vasilisa did not wither. Instead, she blossomed, her beauty deepened by her resilience. The stepmother, gnawed by jealousy, devised a darker plan. She moved the family to a cottage at the very edge of the great forest, that liminal place where ordinary paths dissolve and the air vibrates with the unseen. Villagers whispered of what lurked within, that the forest belonged to Baba Yaga, whose house turned on chicken legs, whose fence gleamed with the skulls of the dead. It was no mere forest, but the borderland between the breathing and the still, the known and the forbidden. One autumn night, under a sky without stars, the stepmother snuffed out every flame. The hearths died, the candles guttered into smoke, and darkness swallowed the cottage whole. "We have no fire," she declared, feigning sorrow. "One of you must fetch light from our neighbor." The stepsisters shrieked in false terror at the suggestion, knowing well that the only neighbor was the witch of the forest. At last, all eyes turned to Vasilisa. Her heart trembled, for the task was a death sentence disguised as a chore. Yet she bowed her head and obeyed, for she had little choice. Into the black woods she went, with only her doll in her pocket and the memory of her mother's last blessing. The trees swallowed her instantly. Branches reached like skeletal arms, snagging her hair and sleeves. The wind moaned with voices, half human, half beast. Shadows shifted, some whispering, some silent, some too close for comfort. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to flee. But the doll, warm in her pocket, seemed to guide her steps, tugging her along hidden paths, where roots did not trip, and where the unseen claws hesitated to strike. She whispered to it her fear, and though it gave no reply, her heart steadied, as if a presence walked beside her, invisible but strong. By dawn she was deep within the forest, yet the trees here did not seem like the ones before. They were older, gnarled with age, their bark carved with patterns that looked like symbols of forgotten gods. The air itself vibrated with an energy neither cruel nor kind, but heavy with judgment, as if the woods themselves were waiting to see what she would do. It was here that she saw the first of the riders. From the darkness galloped a man clothed in white, astride a stallion as pale as bone. His face shone with light, and as he thundered past, the night retreated, replaced with the grey breath of dawn. Vasilisa crossed herself, awestruck. This was no mortal rider. She had crossed into a realm where the forces of time themselves rode as men. The doll pressed against her ribs as if in warning. The first sign had come. Others would follow, and deeper still lay the hut of Baba Yaga, spinning, waiting, surrounded by the eyes of the dead. The forest deepened as the day advanced. Vasilisa, clutching her doll within her pocket, felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down upon her. Each step took her further from the world of hearth and field, further into the marrow of a place where spirits held dominion. By midday, the shadows thinned, but the strangeness only sharpened. It was then that the second rider appeared. He thundered past upon a stallion red as blood, his garments blazing with the color of flame. His face was flushed and brilliant, and wherever his hooves struck, the sun itself seemed to ignite above the trees. Noon descended in full force, sharp and merciless, as though the rider carried the very sun upon his shoulders. Vasilisa shielded her eyes, but she did not falter. She understood now these were not men, but embodiments of the world's turning. White dawn, red noon. The forest was revealing its laws to her, laws that mortals rarely glimpsed. The doll pulsed warmly in her palm as if to remind her. These were servants of the one she sought, guardians of thresholds, heralds of transformation. For in Slavic lore, time is not abstract but alive, clothed in flesh, riding upon horses through the hidden paths of the world. To meet them is to know you have crossed into the other side of reality. By evening the forest cleared. Before her lay a space both wondrous and terrible, the clearing of Baba Yaga. At its heart stood the hut on chicken legs, spinning slowly as if caught in a dizzy dance, its windows gleaming like eyes, its timbers groaning like a living throat. Around it stretched the fence of bones, each skull fixed upon a post, each socket glowing with the light of spirits bound to serve their mistress. The ground seemed to breathe, and the air hung thick with smoke that had no source. Vasilisa's knees trembled, but she clutched the doll and whispered the words her mother's blessing had carved into her memory. "Guide me." Just as her lips closed, the third rider came. He was clad in black, his steed darker still, his face obscured in shadow. He did not glance at her as he passed, but galloped straight through the gates of bone and vanished into the spinning hut itself. And as he vanished, night fell at once. The sky collapsed into blackness. The clearing plunged into shadows so deep that only the skulls shone with their unholy fire. Their glow was enough to reveal her path, but it was a light that seemed to see her, to strip her bare. Vasilisa shuddered. She knew now what she had witnessed. Baba Yaga's servants, the riders of day, sun and night. They were not merely attendants, but the embodiment of time itself. To step forward meant crossing into the witch's dominion, where hours obeyed her command, and days galloped like horses at her bidding. She was no mere hermit of the woods. She was mistress of time, wielder of dawn, noon, and midnight. The doll shifted as if alive, pressing into her hand. Vasilisa understood. There could be no turning back. She whispered the secret words taught by rumor and rhyme, the spell to still the house. "Hut, hut, turn your back to the forest, your front to me." At once the cabin groaned, its monstrous legs bending. With a sickening creak, it lowered itself to the earth, the door yawning open like a waiting mouth. The skulls rattled in their sockets, their flames flaring higher, illuminating the path as if urging her forward. Inside, the air was foul and rich, heavy with herbs, and the iron tang of something darker. She crossed the threshold, and the hut swallowed her whole. What she found inside defied every law of space. It was larger than the clearing itself, filled with shelves of strange jars, bundles of roots, and scraps of human bone repurposed as tools. A stove loomed vast and black, and above it hovered disembodied hands, darting through the air to stir cauldrons, to chop herbs, to sweep floors. The house itself was alive, its timbers groaning with a heartbeat that was not its own. Then the ground shuddered. The trees outside bent, as if bowing to an unseen presence. The very air howled as wind and shadow spiraled into the clearing. With a scream like tearing cloth, Baba Yaga returned. She landed in her mortar, its great bulk settling into the courtyard, her pestle clutched in one hand, her broom in the other. Her hair whipped about her head like a storm cloud, her nose hooked long and sharp as a sickle moon, her eyes burning with an intelligence both human and inhuman. She sniffed the air, lips peeling back to reveal iron teeth. "I smell a human," she shrieked. "Who is there?" The hut itself seemed to tremble with her voice. Vasilisa's heart thundered, but she remembered her doll's counsel. Be respectful, be brave. She stepped forward, bowed low, and spoke without tremor. "It is only I, grandmother. My stepsisters sent me to beg a fire." Baba Yaga's gaze narrowed, her eyes like two coals smoldering in a pit. "I know your stepmother," she hissed. Her grin widened, cruel and sharp. "Very well. You shall have your fire if you earn it. You will work for me, girl. If you fail, I will sharpen my teeth upon your bones." So began Vasilisa's trial, the first of many tasks set by the witch who ruled not only the forest, but time itself. At dawn, Baba Yaga's command cracked like thunder. She pointed with her pestle, her voice a hiss. Vasilisa must sweep the yard until every leaf was gone, scour the hut until it gleamed, cook a meal fit for the witch herself, and worst of all, take a bushel of wheat and separate it, grain by grain, from a mountain of dirt and poppy seeds. "And it must all be done before I return," Baba Yaga sneered, her iron teeth flashing like knives. "If not, I will feast on your flesh and use your skull to light my fence." With that, she vanished into the sky in her great mortar, leaving the girl alone with her despair. Vasilisa gazed at the impossible heap, her spirit nearly breaking. No mortal hands could finish such a task in a single day. Her breath came heavy, and tears traced her cheeks. But the doll, her mother's gift, seemed to stir in her pocket. She placed it upon the table, fed it a crumb of bread, and whispered her plight. At once its painted eyes gleamed, and a tiny voice rose like a hush in the room. "Do not weep, little mistress. Eat your supper, say your prayers, and rest. For the morning is always wiser than the evening." Exhausted, Vasilisa obeyed. While she slept, the doll moved. At its command, swarms of ants marched in black rivers, separating seeds from soil with tireless patience. Birds swooped from the rafters, pecking, sorting, carrying. Even the disembodied hands that served the hut, bound by the deeper laws of magic, lent their aid. By dawn, the impossible task lay completed. Neat piles of wheat, poppy seeds, and dirt, divided with eerie perfection. When Baba Yaga returned, her nostrils flared as she sniffed the air. She prowled the hut, eyes scanning the yard, the hearth, the table. Each task was done, every corner spotless, every chore completed. She snarled, her face contorting with frustration, but she could not punish the girl. Bound by ancient laws, a witch cannot devour one who has met her demands. Instead, she spat another challenge. "Tomorrow, you will do more, harder still." And so it was. Each day, Baba Yaga set new ordeals. To sort mountains of grain, to fill leaky barrels with water, to weave cloth from nettles too sharp to touch. Each command was meant not only to test Vasilisa's endurance, but to break her spirit. Yet each night, she fed the doll, whispered her troubles, and each morning, the tasks were miraculously done. The doll called upon the invisible helpers of the forest, spiders to spin threads finer than silk, bees to seal barrels with their wax, unseen hands to labor while the world slept. Baba Yaga seethed. Each morning she expected failure and a new skull for her fence, yet each time the girl triumphed. Her suspicion grew. She stalked Vasilisa with eyes like burning embers, muttering to herself, grinding her teeth against stone. At night, the clearing howled with the noise of her rage, trees bending, skulls clattering, the hut itself shivering on its legs. Yet the girl remained steady, strengthened not by her own power, but by the gift of her mother's blessing and the intuition of the little doll. In the dark between tasks, Vasilisa began to see the hidden purpose of her ordeal. The witch's cruelty was not only malice, it was initiation. To labor in Baba Yaga's hut was to be tested by the forces of chaos, to be refined in the fire of impossibility. Many were consumed, but those who endured emerged changed, carrying a light not of this world. Baba Yaga, for all her threats, was not only predator but gatekeeper, weighing the worth of every soul who dared to enter her domain. By the third night, Vasilisa's fear had shifted into awe. She began to realize that she was no longer the same girl who had stumbled, trembling, into the forest. She was stronger, wiser, and though she still relied on the doll, she had learned to trust her own endurance. Even in the hut that devoured the unworthy, her spirit was not broken. Instead, it was being tempered like iron in a witch's fire. When Baba Yaga saw the third day's tasks completed without flaw, she paused. The firelight of her eyes dimmed into something like reluctant respect. She grumbled, muttering that perhaps the girl was protected by a power older than her own. Still, the witch's tests were not yet done. She leaned close, her breath hot and foul, and rasped, "You may ask me questions, child, but ask wisely, for not all knowledge is safe." Thus the trials had shifted, no longer chores of hand and body, but the peril of questions and answers, the wisdom of what to ask and what to leave unsaid. The witch squatted by the stove, her bones creaking like branches in a storm. The flames leapt higher, as if eager to hear the girl's words. Baba Yaga's eyes gleamed, twin sparks that could burn truth from lies. "Ask, child," she rasped, her voice like stones grinding together. "You have earned the right, but remember, to know too much is to be devoured by knowledge itself." Vasilisa bowed low, careful to show humility but not weakness. The doll pulsed against her palm, urging restraint. She steadied her breath and spoke. "I saw a rider in white," she said softly. "Who was he?" Baba Yaga's iron lips curled into a grin. "That was my bright day." Her teeth clinked as though savoring the words. "He rides to herald the dawn, to chase the shadows from my domain." "And the rider in red?" Vasilisa continued. "My red son," Baba Yaga growled, tapping her long yellow nails against the pestle. "He burns at noon, scorching the land with fire. He is my strength." And the rider in black?" The witch leaned closer, her hair falling like dark moss around her face. "That," she whispered, "is my dark midnight. He swallows the world in shadow. He is the silence in which all things end." Vasilisa trembled, but held her composure. She did not ask about the disembodied hands that flitted about the hut, nor the jars whose contents shifted like living things. She remembered the doll's counsel. It is not good to know too much. Instead, she bowed and said, "Grandmother, I will not pry into secrets you do not wish revealed." For the first time, Baba Yaga laughed, not the cackle of cruelty, but a low, guttural laugh, like earth splitting open. "Wise," she said. "Wisdom is not only in questions asked, but in questions spared. You have passed the final test." Bound by laws older than fire, the witch could no longer withhold her promise. She rose, sweeping across the room like smoke, and led Vasilisa outside to the fence of bones. The skulls flared with an unholy brilliance as the night deepened. Baba Yaga plucked one from its post, its sockets blazing like lanterns of the underworld. She mounted it on a stick and thrust it into the girl's hands. "Here is your fire," she said. "Take it home. Let it light your way, or burn all that awaits you. It is not mine to command once given. It will serve you now." Vasilisa bowed deeply. Though the skull was hideous, she felt the weight of its power. This was not merely a flame, it was a spark from death itself, a lantern of judgment. The doll whispered faintly in her pocket, "Do not discard it. What has been earned must be carried." As Vasilisa turned to leave, the witch's voice followed her, cold and final. "Be well, child. You have been served." It was not a blessing, but an acknowledgement, one power recognizing another. The forest groaned, the hut shifted, the skulls flickered. The ordeal was over, but the true trial had yet to begin. The girl walked back through the black wood, yet now the path no longer seemed so menacing. The branches bent away from the blazing skull she carried, its light cutting through the dark. Creatures that had once stalked her now fled. Even the shadows recoiled, as if terrified of the flame's judgment. It was a lantern that did not simply show the way, it revealed what ought not to hide. Still, dread gnawed at her heart. The stepmother and stepsisters had sent her here to die. What fate awaited them now, that she returned with fire stolen from the witch's realm? The skull in her hand hissed, its eyes glowing hotter as though hungering for its next victims. When she finally reached the cottage, her stepmother and stepsisters rushed to meet her. They pretended relief, their faces twisted with greed. They had lived in darkness since she left, unable to strike a spark. They saw the light she carried and rejoiced, believing their scheme had succeeded. But as Vasilisa stepped inside, the skull's gaze turned upon them. Its sockets flared, beams of fire piercing the shadows. The stepmother screamed. The sisters fled to corners, but the light followed, relentless, unblinking. It burned not their flesh at once, but their very essence. They withered, their bodies twisting in agony as the fire judged them. By dawn, nothing remained but 3 small piles of ash, grey and silent. Vasilisa wept, not from sorrow, but from awe. This was no murder she had committed. It was justice, executed by a power far beyond her hands. The skull's work complete, she buried it in the garden, so it could harm no other. The doll whispered softly, "Your ordeal is ended. You are no longer the girl who left this house. You have walked through death and returned with fire." And so Vasilisa left the cursed cottage forever, stepping into a life remade. She was no longer merely beautiful, she was powerful, tempered by trial, and marked by the witch's fire. She had faced the great mother of the woods and survived, carrying within her the wisdom of endurance and the justice of the other world. The dawn after the burning was unlike any dawn Vasilisa had ever known. No rooster crowed, no smoke rose from neighboring chimneys. The air was strangely still, as if the forest itself had paused to watch her next step. Behind her, the cottage lay in silence, its hearth cold, its cruel mistresses reduced to ash and memory. Before her stretched a path bathed in the faintest morning light, and in her hands the soil was still warm from where she had buried the skull. What had happened was not mere revenge, it was judgment. The skull's fire had not acted with malice or pettiness. It had burned with the impartial clarity of the other world. Just as the sun rises without concern for whether men live or die beneath its rays, so too had the skull cast its gaze. Those who thrived in cruelty had been consumed by it. Those who sought to betray had been betrayed by their own plot. Vasilisa's heart trembled, not with fear, but with a dawning realization. She was no longer only a victim of cruelty. She was now a wielder of power, borrowed from the liminal threshold between life and death. In Slavic lore, fire is not simply warmth, it is a living spirit, both healer and destroyer. To carry it from Baba Yaga's fence of skulls was to bear the light of judgment itself. Few survived such a trial with their spirit intact. Fewer still could wield its lessons without being consumed. She whispered to the doll, "What now?" Its painted face did not move, but in her heart she heard, "Now you walk your own path. You have endured the test. The world beyond the forest will be changed by the fire you carry within." As she stepped from the forest's edge, villagers whispered of her return. To them, she was not merely a girl, she was a figure touched by the uncanny. Some bowed their heads as she passed, sensing the unseen power clinging to her like a shadow. Others crossed themselves, muttering that no mortal could emerge from Baba Yaga's hut unscathed. The stories spread quickly, as such stories always do. Vasilisa the Beautiful had become Vasilisa the Enduring, the girl who faced the witch of the woods and brought back fire without being devoured. But even as the village spoke, Vasilisa knew the tale was larger than gossip. She had walked through a ritual of transformation known to countless myths and traditions. Across cultures, the journey into the wilderness, the encounter with the devouring mother, and the return with a gift of power is an ancient pattern. In Greece, Persephone was taken into the underworld, and from her return sprang the seasons. In the Norse sagas, heroes descended into frost and shadow, returning with wisdom or treasure. In Christian parable, fire from heaven descends as tongues of flame, granting power and renewal. Vasilisa too had crossed the threshold and come back with fire not of the hearth, but of destiny. In the silence of her own thoughts, she remembered the witch's words, "You have been well served, child. Be well." It had not been kindness, it had been acknowledgement. Baba Yaga was no mere villain to be outwitted, no monster defeated. She was the tester, the gatekeeper, the one who weighed souls. Vasilisa had been found worthy, and this worthiness was not hers alone. She carried within her the memory of her mother, the blessing woven into the doll, the patience of ants, the guidance of birds, the mercy of unseen helpers. Her victory was a chorus of voices, mortal and immortal, that had joined to see her through. The fire she bore within was both inheritance and initiation. As time passed, Vasilisa's fate branched into many tellings. In some, she caught the eye of a great prince, her wisdom and beauty raising her to the throne. In others, she lived quietly, weaving cloth so fine it astonished even the Tsar. And in still others, she became a wise woman herself, a counselor who spoke with the calm strength of one who had walked into death's mouth and returned. Each tale diverges, but all share the same core. She did not emerge from the forest unchanged. For the forest in folklore is never only a place of trees. It is the womb of transformation, the crucible where the self is stripped bare and reforged. To leave its shadow is to be reborn. And so Vasilisa, carrying within her the silent wisdom of her doll and the terrible light of Baba Yaga's skull, stepped forward into a life where fear no longer held her. She was no longer the girl sent on a death errand. She was now a figure of power, a bearer of light, a reminder that even the cruelest trial can forge a soul as unbreakable as iron. The tale of Vasilisa did not end when she buried the skull in the earth. Stories rarely die. They grow, branching like rivers, reshaped by every tongue that retells them. In one village, she was remembered as Vasilisa the Beautiful, her tale an ode to endurance, intuition, and the quiet justice of fire. Yet in another, she was Vasilisa the Brave, a girl less delicate and far more wild, a rifle in her hands, her eyes sharp with defiance, an unmaidenly figure who hunted as well as any man, and who faced the witch not with trembling but with grim resolve. In some versions, she was not delivered by a doll at all, but by her own cunning. Her gift was weaving, her hands conjuring cloth of such brilliance that even the Tsar himself took notice. In those tellings, it was not the skull's fiery judgment that won her place in the world, but the miracle of artistry. Thread by thread, she transformed suffering into splendor, each stitch a rebellion against cruelty. But no matter how the story shifts, whether Vasilisa is the meek child protected by a mother's blessing, or the fierce huntress armed with steel, the essence is unchanged. Always she journeys into the deep wood. Always she enters the hut of bones. Always she faces the terrible crone who rules the border of life and death. And always she returns changed, bearing something the ordinary world cannot contain. This pattern echoes across cultures. To the Celts, such a tale might be the sovereignty myth, the maiden tested by a hideous hag, who, once respected, transforms into a queenly figure of power. To the Greeks, it recalls the descent of Kore into the underworld to become Persephone, queen of the dead. To the Norse, it is akin to the hero who ventures into the hall of the giants, only to return with wisdom stolen from those ancient foes. Vasilisa is not alone. She is one of countless who walk the archetypal road of descent and return. Folklorists say that what remains constant across these branching streams is the ritual of initiation. The young girl, or sometimes the young boy, must confront the devouring presence, the terrible mother, the keeper of thresholds. To survive is to prove oneself, to step beyond childhood into the realm of adulthood, carrying power not meant for the untested. The cruel stepmother, the mocking sisters these are, but sparks that drive her into the forest, into the crucible where the true shaping takes place. And Baba Yaga herself changes as Vasilisa changes. In some tales, she devours the unworthy without hesitation. In others, she is a strict but fair donor, offering wisdom and fire to those who show respect. At times, she is both fearsome and generous, merciless and just. Her ambiguity is the very heart of her power. She is not evil, nor good. She is the storm that destroys crops, and yet nourishes the soil with rain. She is the frost that kills the harvest, but also ensures its cycle. She is the devouring, unrelenting face of nature itself. Thus, every version of Vasilisa's story reveals the same truth. The ordeal is unavoidable, but the outcome is not fixed. The witch may destroy, or she may empower. The difference lies in the heart of the one who enters her gate. Respect, humility, courage, these qualities transform Baba Yaga from monster to mentor, from predator to guardian. And so the tale endures, passed from mother to daughter, from fireside to manuscript, reshaped by each teller but carrying the same pulse, that life itself demands passage through the forest of terror, that only by facing the devouring dark can one return, carrying fire. Vasilisa is not merely a character. She is an emblem of survival, of quiet strength concealed in gentleness, of the ancient wisdom whispered by mothers to daughters in a world that often seeks to extinguish them. Her light burns because she dared to step into the shadows. To understand Baba Yaga, one must return to the most haunting image of all, her impossible dwelling. a hut balanced on giant chicken legs, ceaselessly spinning, surrounded by a fence made of human bones, each skull burning with an inner flame. It is a house, and yet not a house. A body, and yet not alive. A riddle of wood and bone at the very edge of the known world. In folklore, a home is meant to shelter, to nourish, yet Baba Yaga's hut is alive, restless, never still. It does not invite, it resists. Its door is turned away from the traveler, facing only the dark wood. Only those who know the secret words, "Hut, hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me," may approach. The incantation is not just a password, but a ritual of worthiness, a recognition that to enter is to pass through a threshold. To speak these words is to choose the path of danger willingly. Once the hut groans and bends its legs to lower itself, the hero crosses into a liminal zone. Anthropologists call this the space betwixt and between, neither one world nor the other. The threshold of Baba Yaga's hut is not simply a doorway, but the very border between life and death, the realm of the living and the thrice 10th kingdom, the Slavic name for the other world. To step inside is to surrender the rules of the ordinary and enter a place where spirits move freely and time obeys other laws. The fence of bones reinforces this truth. It is not meant to keep intruders out, but to declare, in no uncertain terms, that those who fail within will become part of the boundary themselves. The lock of a jawbone, the gate made of legs, these grotesque details remind us that the cost of failure is absorption into the land of the dead. The skulls burn not with firewood's flame, but with eternal fire from the underworld. Each socket glows like a lantern, lit by memory, by punishment, by fate. The hut, the fence, the skulls together, they are more than grotesque imagery. They are symbols of initiation, warning, and promise entwined. In Celtic myth, standing stones or barrows mark the passage into fairy realms. In Norse sagas, a bridge of fire leads to worlds beneath. In Slavic lore, it is the chicken-legged hut, the uncanny dwelling that both repels and beckons. And consider the legs themselves. Chicken legs are grotesque, comical even, yet they are deeply symbolic. In many ancient northern cultures, food storehouses were built on tree stumps or stilts to protect them from animals and flood. Seen from afar, such cabins looked like creatures perched on talons. Memory of these structures became myth, and myth transformed the practical into the monstrous. The hut is thus both real and unreal, a distorted echo of human invention, magnified into legend. But there is deeper symbolism still. The hut walks, runs, spins like time itself. It turns endlessly, reminding the hero that stability is gone. Life itself is not a static dwelling, but a ceaseless rotation, a wheel that demands courage to step onto. The hero who enters is no longer in the realm of human order. They are within the cycle of death and rebirth, trial and transformation. For Vasilisa, to enter the hut was to leave behind her old self. The girl who crossed its threshold was the girl who trembled in fear, abandoned in cruelty. The woman who emerged was tempered, reborn, carrying fire. The hut, then, is not only Baba Yaga's dwelling, it is the crucible of transformation itself. In many traditions, initiates enter a place of bones to face death symbolically. In the mysteries of Eleusis, they descended into the underworld. In Siberian shamanic rites, the novice dreams of being dismembered by spirits, their bones scattered and remade. Baba Yaga's hut echoes the same initiation. To enter is to risk dissolution. To emerge is to be remade. The hut is grotesque, yes, but it is also sacred. It is the unholy shrine where the living meet the dead, where the soul is tested, where fate decides whether one will burn to ash or walk out carrying light. The witch's home was not the only impossibility. To encounter Baba Yaga was to behold her strange tools, domestic objects, twisted into emblems of cosmic power. She does not ride a horse, nor a chariot, nor even a broomstick like the witches of Western lore. No, Baba Yaga travels through the sky in a giant mortar, steering with a pestle, while sweeping away her tracks with a broom of silver birch. To modern ears it may sound absurd, almost comical. Yet in the dark lens of folklore, these objects reveal a far older, more profound symbolism. The mortar and pestle were the heart of every Slavic household. In them, grain was ground to flour, herbs to medicine, roots to powders for charms and cures. They were tools of nourishment and survival, the instruments through which raw nature was transformed into sustenance. But in Baba Yaga's hands, creation is inverted. Her mortar does not feed, it hunts. Her pestle does not grind grain, it steers her flight across the night sky. These tools of life become weapons of pursuit, signs that domestic power has slipped its boundaries, no longer contained by hearth and home. She is the storm breaking free of its vessel, the mother who will not nurture but devour. This reversal echoes an older truth found across myth. In Greek tales, Demeter is goddess of the harvest, bringing fertility through grain, yet her rage also brings famine. In Norse lore, the giantess Hirokin rides a wolf and uses serpents as rain's domestic order turned into monstrosity. Baba Yaga's mortar and pestle belong to this lineage, instruments of the everyday, now terrifying because they are unbound from their expected roles. And then there is the broom. At first glance, a simple tool for sweeping dust from a cottage floor. But in Baba Yaga's hands, it becomes a device of erasure, sweeping away her very passage. She leaves no trail, no trace for the eye or the spirit to follow. In folklore, to vanish without a trace is to belong to the other world, to move through the cracks of reality. Her broom is not for cleanliness, it is for concealment. She moves through the mortal world, but refuses to leave her mark upon it. She is both present and absent, her existence a reminder that not all encounters can be pursued or repeated. The broom also carries ritual weight. In many cultures, brooms were used to cleanse spaces of spirits, to mark boundaries between the sacred and the profane. In wedding rites, couples leapt over brooms as symbols of crossing into new life. But Baba Yaga uses hers to obscure, to enforce the secrecy of her dominion. Where she travels, memory itself is swept away. She is the silence after the storm, the erasure of footprints in the snow. The symbolism sharpens when we place these objects together. The mortar vessel of transformation, the pestle instrument of force, the broom keeper of boundaries. Together they represent the three powers of the witch: to transmute, to direct, and to conceal. She can grind life into dust, steer the very elements to her will, and erase all evidence of her passage. These are not random objects. They are the tools of liminality, the powers of one who dwells at the crossroads of creation and destruction, and they carry a whisper of ritual. In Siberian shamanic visions, initiates are often boiled in cauldrons or ground into pieces before being remade by spirits. The mortar in Baba Yaga's tales may echo these initiations, where bone is ground to powder so that new power may grow. Her broom recalls the rites of purification, but turned to secrecy. Her tools are not just symbols of her might, they are reminders of the cost of initiation. To approach her is to risk being ground, scattered, erased. Thus, Baba Yaga's tools tell us what she truly island. She is the perversion of the domestic, the inversion of the comforting. She is the truth that every tool of life has its shadow. Food becomes famine, comfort becomes captivity, shelter becomes tomb. In her hands, the mortar and pestle no longer sustain, they hunt. And the broom no longer cleans, it silences. This is why even the bravest tremble at her passing through the skies. To see her is to be reminded that the ordinary can become monstrous in an instant, that the cradle of life is always just a breath away from the coffin. Around Baba Yaga's uncanny hut, the forest clears into a circle of dread. There stands her fence, not of wood or stone, but of human bones. Leg bones lashed into gates, ribs bent into arches, and skulls crowning each post. Their hollow sockets glow with an inner fire, burning without wood or fuel, a light from beyond the grave. For the weary traveler, this sight is more than horror, it is revelation. The fence is not built to keep intruders out. No barrier of bone could stop the truly determined. Instead, it is a proclamation. Each skull is a warning, a trophy, and a promise. The message is clear. This is the land of death. To enter is to risk becoming part of its architecture. One post always stands bare, its spike awaiting the next skull, as if whispering to the traveler, "You may be the one to complete this circle." In Slavic imagination, the skull is not only death but also knowledge. Long after flesh rots away, the skull remains, a silent vessel of memory. To walk among Baba Yaga's fence is to stand among the preserved remnants of failed initiates, each skull still glowing with the fire of lessons unlearned, trials unmet. In this way, her fence is not mere terror, it is a library of the damned. This motif is not unique to Slavic lore. Across the world, death keepers mark their boundaries with bone. The Celtic druids spoke of cauldrons ringed with skulls, their eyes lit by sacred flame. In the Hindu cremation grounds, ascetics dwelt among charnel remains, seeking wisdom in the presence of death. In the Norse sagas, the Valkyries raised skull cups for the slain in Odin's hall. To surround oneself with bone is to dwell perpetually in the shadow of mortality, to claim kinship with powers beyond life. For Baba Yaga, the fence marks her dominion as a chthonic goddess in exile. She does not merely live near the dead, she lives with them, within them, through them. Her fence is a literal threshold, a boundary between the living forest and the underworld beyond. To pass through the gate of leg bones is to step willingly into the liminal, a journey that cannot be undone. The fire that glows in the skull's sockets deepens this symbolism. It is no ordinary flame, but the fire of judgment, the same fire Vasilisa carried home. In folklore, flame is spirit itself eternal, undying, consuming yet illuminating. When it burns in the skull, it signifies that even death cannot extinguish awareness. The gaze of the skull watches, unblinking, and its fire remembers. To carry such a flame is to carry not just light, but the relentless eye of truth. It is here we see Baba Yaga's paradox sharpen. She is terrifying, yes, but she is also custodian. Her skulls do not merely decorate, they illuminate. Without them, the clearing would be pitch black, a realm of confusion. With them, it is lit though by a light that judges, not comforts. In this way, her fence is both curse and gift. It frightens the living, yet guides them. It threatens annihilation, yet reveals the path. The skull itself is a universal initiatory symbol. In medieval alchemy, adepts placed a skull upon their desks as memento mori, a reminder that all flesh fades, and only through death does one find transformation. In Slavic tradition, a skull could be placed upon a threshold to protect a household, its hollow gaze warding off spirits. Baba Yaga's skulls are both guardians and executioners, warning and welcome, peril and protection. So the traveler who approaches the hut must make a choice. To flee the sight of the fence is to remain forever in the realm of the untested. To step past it is to embrace death's gaze, to risk becoming another lantern in the witch's clearing. And therein lies the terror and the promise. Only by facing the fence of skulls can one hope to pass into the deeper mysteries she guards. Baba Yaga's fence, then, is not just the architecture of horror, it is the architecture of truth. Every soul must someday pass through the gate of bone. Every life must meet the skull's eternal gaze. Her fence reminds us of this universal law. The land of the dead is never far, and its boundary is closer than we dare believe. To truly grasp the shadow of Baba Yaga, one must step back from the fairy tale and into the deeper memory of the Slavic world, an age before the cross, before saints and scriptures, when the land itself was alive with gods and spirits. In that time, nature was not scenery but sanctuary, and every grove, river, and mountain bent with presence. Baba Yaga, as she appears in the stories, is not merely a witch, she is the faded silhouette of a goddess. Her realm is liminal. She is never found in the heart of the village, nor in the bustling markets, nor in the temples of men. always she lingers at the threshold, at the edge of forest and field, at the border of the known and the unknown. Her hut, with its legs turning restlessly, reflects her nature. It is never still, never fixed. Like death, like fate, like time itself, she cannot be contained. Folklorists and historians have long suggested that she is a fragment of the ancient triple goddess archetype: maiden, mother, crone. In this triad, the maiden is youth, promise, and beginnings. The mother is fertility, nourishment, and power, and the crone is winter, death, and wisdom. Baba Yaga is the crone in full, the terrifying and necessary end of cycles. She devours, but she also renews. She judges, but she also initiates. To meet her is to face the winter of the soul, the death that must come before rebirth. Across Europe, her sisters can be glimpsed. The Slavic goddess Morana, or Marzana, embodies winter, famine, and death. Effigies of her are still burned or drowned in spring rituals to banish the cold and invite life's return. In the highlands of Scotland, the Cailleach, the blue-faced hag, shapes the mountains and calls down the frosts with her great hammer. In Germany, Frau Holle spins rewards for the diligent and punishments for the lazy, both benefactor and tormentor. Each is a face of the same primal figure, the ancient mother of winter, who both kills and preserves, who withers but also teaches. Baba Yaga is her Slavic face. This is why she is not simply villainous. Her cruelty is not random. It is ritual. She tests the soul of the one who dares approach. She demands labor, impossible tasks, endurance. Yet those who pass emerge not as they entered. They are marked, transformed, carrying power or wisdom from her realm. Those who fail are consumed, their bones added to the fence, their light extinguished. She is trial embodied, the necessary gatekeeper who ensures that not all may pass, but only the worthy. The ancients understood that death is not only an ending but also a passage. The seeds that fall rot in the soil, yet from them spring the harvest. The body that decays feeds the earth, giving birth to new life. Baba Yaga embodies this cycle, dreadful and sacred. She is not evil because she consumes. She is natural because she consumes. She is not good because she gives gifts. She is inevitable because she tests. To step into her hut is to enact the universal rite of passage. In anthropology, this is called the liminal stage: separation from the known, confrontation with chaos, and eventual return transformed. Baba Yaga is the mistress of this stage. She strips, she frightens, she judges, and only then, if the soul endures, does she permit return. In this light, her grotesque hut, her fence of bones, her skulls of flame, are not decorations of terror but the sacred trappings of initiation. She is not merely an old woman in the woods. She is the last remnant of a goddess who once ruled the frost, who presided over the end of cycles, who ensured that no life could exist without death. That is why she lingers, even now, in story after story, her image enduring while countless other spirits faded. For she embodies something eternal, something that cannot be banished, the truth that every path, no matter how bright, must pass through shadow, that every hero, no matter how bold, must face the devouring crone at the edge of the world. Baba Yaga is not just the witch, she is the gate. She is the guardian of the threshold, where the living touch the land of the dead, where endings become beginnings, where terror becomes wisdom. We have walked through the dark forest, followed the trembling steps of Vasilisa, and stood before the impossible hut that straddles two worlds. We have watched skulls burn with the fire of judgment, seen mortars fly through the sky, and heard the broom sweep away every trace of passage. We have witnessed Baba Yaga not only as a witch of fairy tales, but as something far older, a remnant of a goddess who once presided over winter, death, and wisdom. She is not simple. She cannot be tamed into a neat category of good or evil. She is a paradox, a living contradiction. To some, she is the devourer, the cruel hag who grinds bones and laughs at human frailty. To others, She is the donor, the one who gifts fire, wisdom, or a horse swifter than death itself. To every soul who enters her domain, she is the test, the threshold that demands courage, humility, and wit. Across centuries, storytellers reshaped her, but they never erased her. She survives because she embodies something eternal. She is the truth of endings, the terror of mortality, the inevitability of decay. Yet she is also the spark of transformation, the hidden wisdom that only emerges when one dares to confront the darkness. Even now, she walks beside us in disguise. She flickers in music that rumbles like storm clouds. She appears in films and games, her name borrowed as shorthand for unstoppable power. But beneath every new mask, the same shadow watches the crone of the wood, waiting at the edge of the path, daring us to knock upon her door. And perhaps that is why Baba Yaga endures where other spirits have faded. She is not merely a character, she is an initiation, an invitation whispered across time. Come into the forest, face what devours you, return with fire. The hut still waits, the skulls still burn, and the crone still smiles her toothy smile, testing each who approaches. For she is not a story that ends. She is the shadow every story must one day pass through.